Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Security Squawk Podcast episode. I think we're on 39 now, boys. Welcome to the show, Randy from
Somewhere down in Texas.
Texas. Why are you cutting me off? Why are you cutting me off? I like to talk slow. And Reginald Andre, Miami, Florida. I'm Bryan Hornung. I'm up here in right outside of Philadelphia in beautiful southern New Jersey. We are the crew that does the Security Squawk Podcast. Our goal is to educate you about cybersecurity, but break it down to a level that pretty much anybody will understand. And the only fee we ask, we don't bore you with ads. We don't promote anything on this show. Just share the show. If you like something, if you are educated, if you're entertained in any way, if you see this as a positive thing, share it out. Let other people know about it. And if you don't like us, don't watch us. Don't listen to us. So that's it. So how you doing, guys? What's up,
doing well. It's raining a little here, but still a beautiful day in sunny South Florida.
Nice. Randy, me and you are under the weather a little bit.
Doing great down here. I think we're having a little bit of a heat wave. Yesterday felt like our first real day of summer. It was around 100 degrees, I think is what they said. We're supposed to get a cool front tomorrow. So I know we always talk about the weather, but man, down here, it's usually pretty extreme. It's either drought, flood, or 100 degrees or something like that. So anyway, glad to be here today, man. A lot of stuff to talk about.
Yeah, I feel you, bro. So yeah, there is a lot of stuff to talk about. So I guess we'll let the audience in on what that is today. Meanwhile, I'm just like doing the social media thing so we can get some viewers on the screen because we don't have any yet. So let's get that fired up. And then, we are on, obviously, guys, we're on every podcast platform that's out there. You can download us anytime. And, we love that. And we hope that you listen to us in the car, in the while you're working out or on your walks or whatever you're doing when you have, 30, 40 minutes of time, because that's about how much time we spend per episode. But we also do this live on Facebook, YouTube, and I think we're going to be live on LinkedIn soon. I applied for live streaming on LinkedIn. So hopefully we'll be able to pop over on LinkedIn and go live over there. I do share the show on LinkedIn when we are live, but it's just a link that sends them over to the YouTube feed. So that'll be cool to go on LinkedIn as well. So we're pretty much hitting everywhere. But jumping into it here. And if you guys see us on social media right now, please share us out. Share us out right now. People will see this. If you're watching, share us out to your friends and family and let them know that, there's guys out here, cybersecurity experts that are educating people on, what the heck is going on. And there's actually a big cyber attack going on right now, and I don't think it's getting that much press. And I'm kind of curious as to why that is. So who wants to take the lead and fill everybody in on what the big cyber attack is, what everybody should know about, and where we're at right now?
Oh, I'll take it. So essentially, we have the Iowan Agriculture Group was hit by a ransomware attack over the weekend, and they're claiming that this could be worse than the Colonial Pipeline.
What was the name of that group?
I'm pronouncing it as Iowan, from Iowa, but IOWAN.
Yeah, but what is it's something collective? Give me 1 second. I gotta pull that up. It's this new cooperative.
Yeah.
Cooperative.
Oh yes.
So I guess let's break it down there first. What's the new cooperative? And help people understand like what this is and how this impacts them, because not a lot of people understand like how agriculture works and how stuff gets to your grocery store and ultimately to your table.
So,
and it's not just about bread, right? You hear grain and your brain probably automatically goes to bread. And this group is warning of, long outages and supply outages and delays in a lot of different areas of the food industry. So, Randy, you want to talk about how this grain producer impacts the supply chain and at what level?
Yeah. You started off asking about what it is. Basically, a cooperative allows smaller farmers to pool their resources together to work with basically an organization, so then they can get better prices for their stuff, have better distribution points. And so think of a cooperative as, bringing thousands of farms together. So that's their distribution point. That's the bottleneck, if you will. And these guys have been targeted with ransomware. They're asking for almost, I think, like $6 million for the ransom. And basically it has shut down operations, which, yeah, grain goes into bread, but grain goes into a lot of other things. And it's, basically one of the main links in the food supply chain, especially in the US. I mean, we have a heavy, reliance on grain. We feed grain to cattle and, livestock. And I mean, there's a lot of ramifications that can come out of this.
Yep. Andre, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, and you mentioned the reason that we're not hearing about it is I think it's because it's not a direct link to the consumer. The Colonial Pipeline, you went to the gas station, people were kind of in a crazy moment and putting gas or expecting not to have gas. And right now, it's just people don't see it. They've never heard of this before, and they just, until maybe later on, if the price, depending on how long this goes, if either there's going to be shortages or price increases, and then that's when I think it's really going to make the news.
Yeah, weird one for me. I don't know why it's not being. I mean, some outlets are covering it, but not as much as you would think, because they're saying that this is going to be worse than Colonial Pipeline. Like they're out there saying that this is going to be worse than Colonial Pipeline. So what do you guys think about that? I mean, do we think that this is going to be worse?
According to the cooperative, their 40% of grain production runs on their software. 11 million animals rely on their feed schedules. They're saying, according to this article, that it's going to disrupt the grain, the pork, and the chicken supply chain because of, obviously the grain going to feed the pork and the chicken, like I was saying a little while ago. So it sounds like it could be really, really huge.
Oh man, I'm not trying to be funny here or make light of a pretty crappy situation, but I wonder what's worse, when you mess with people's gas and you mess with people's chicken nuggets.
It's a little bit of both.
So. I mean, will this get the attention of more Americans than the Colonial Pipeline? Because let's be frank, Colonial Pipeline, they thought bad things were going to happen with the gas supply, and it turned out that really didn't happen.
Right. And
now these guys are kind of warning, like, hey, your pork and your chicken is at risk here.
Mm-hmm.
Randy, you're from a part of the country where this is kind of like a big deal. Like I'm in New Jersey. We have some semblance of the agricultural we used to have 20, 30 years ago, but nothing like Texas. Like, what are your thoughts on this? Do you think this is going to...
So my thoughts were, back in February, we had what we called snowpocalypse, where every single county in Texas had a freeze warning. It's never happened as far back as anybody ever knew. But what we noticed in our town were the number of people who just live for today. They have a pot in their kitchen. They might have an old bag of Doritos from 2 weeks ago, but the number of people that just don't keep food on hand, that go out to eat, that are getting their food every day at McDonald's and things like that. And it was a genuine emergency for a lot of people that basically had no food, that never really had thought about that. Maybe that's changed since then. Maybe they woke up to that, but I can only imagine that that's probably true more than just, I know we're in a college town, but it's probably more true around the country than we want to admit. So that could have a huge impact if, they're unable to get food. And already, if you go to, around here, we have HEB. If you go to HEB, some stores just don't seem as full as they were 2 years ago. No one's freaking out yet, but, seeing like, hey, we're out of this, we're out of that. You go to Chick-fil-A and they're saying that, we might be out of the sauce. We might be out of chicken. So yeah, I think it's going to have a pretty big impact. And Texas does have a lot of rural. Texas is a really huge state. We also have a crap ton of people here in a lot of urban areas. This potentially could be huge. It also could maybe cause something good, which is pushing people back to buying locally produced food. I know we've got a guy in our town who has a ranch outside of town, and he's opened up a meat shop, and you can buy fresh meat. No ransomware is going to shut that down, because he just brings his cattle and sells them. We'll probably see more of that come out of this.
Could be. Hopefully we'll see people taking cybersecurity and adopting a framework more seriously as well.
Yes.
And understanding that, you can try to protect and play defense as much as you want, but eventually you're going to have to go on offense, and you're going to have to play some offense. And, sometimes you're going to have to play offense after a cyber attack, unfortunately. And that's kind of the perspective that we want people to understand and have. Now, there's a couple interesting other tidbits about this cyber attack that I want to get into. Number one, this is reportedly being done by a group called BlackMatter, and they have links to DarkSide, and DarkSide was the group that attacked Colonial Pipeline, and that's why we mentioned this supply chain attack along with Colonial Pipeline, because it's basically the same group that has attacked them. And if you remember, two other interesting things. Number one, DarkSide and this group, BlackMatter, they have these dark web sites on the dark web where they leak information. They're either called ransomware leak sites or dark web leak sites. And on those sites, they basically state that they're not going to attack, the critical infrastructure areas, and they kind of define their own critical infrastructure. Let's put it that way. They don't follow the list that Biden gave Putin. And I think that that's what a lot of people refer back to, is like, oh, they're critical infrastructure. They're the people that, Biden identified with Putin at his summit. Yeah, Biden has his list, and his list is way more expansive than what BlackMatter or DarkSide feel is critical infrastructure. And we're seeing that in the negotiations of this ransomware attack, as we've seen security researchers release on Twitter that basically this ransomware group is telling people that you're not big enough in the supply chain for us not to attack you. Mm-hmm. So if they were a bigger piece of the supply chain, they maybe wouldn't have attacked them. And they've actually claimed that they haven't attacked organizations that they have access to just because how big they are or how critical they were. I don't know if those claims are true, but that's what their representatives are saying. And they chose this group because they felt like it wouldn't be that much of an impact on the supply chain to the point where it would affect things too much. This group disagrees with that. But I also got to say, and I want your guys' opinion on this, when you say that, but then you put a ransom demand out there of almost $6 million, are you kind of talking from both sides of your mouth here?
I think it's a combination of oops, and also for them to say, well, like they said, you're not the biggest, but I mean, 40% is big.
What do you mean by oops? Help me understand that.
Meaning they didn't realize, they went fishing and then they caught something, and then they didn't realize how big it was until they're in the situation now. And at this point, it's too late.
And the cooperative is basically saying that the impact will likely be much worse than the pipeline, for context. And they have no way to control that, given this disruption it's already caused, because their systems are down.
Right.
And then, we're already dealing with, other economic factors with, inflation and things like that. And then this is only going, and I've said on my YouTube channel a million times that if you really want to factor in inflation, you're going to have to factor in cybersecurity costs, and companies are going to need to raise prices to pay for what's needed. And it's not a result of the cyber attacks. It's a result of everything that needs to go into it. And businesses still want to remain profitable. So unless they're willing to reach into their profits to pay for proper cybersecurity, they're going to have to charge more. And that's going to cause inflation across the board. Because I believe across the board, all businesses are not spending enough on cybersecurity. Even though they probably will tell you they are, when you really get into it with them, you're going to find out that they're probably not. So, Randy, what's your perspective on this whole ransom demand? You're not that important. We attacked you because you were not that big, and we're not going to cause that much of a disruption.
Well, I would go back to what you mentioned a little while ago, is that businesses have to take responsibility for their own cybersecurity. We don't know the details here yet, but we can't just say, oh, well, I'm critical infrastructure and I shouldn't be attacked. Like, man, I'm reading the screenshot of the conversation between the organization and the criminals from a Twitter feed. And like, it really kind of makes me sick in my stomach that we're having to say, hey, we're critical infrastructure, you should back off. I mean, and I guess that's a good tactic. Hopefully maybe they will, but we've got to be more proactive than that. Like you said, we've got to get more on the offensive about it. Companies need to spend, like 1% to 2%, maybe $300 per employee per month, $2,000 to $3,000 per year per employee. Like, these are real hard costs that need to start. We need to start doing it. You're right. It's going to drive up prices, but we're going to have to do it because we've got to get secure, because look at the boat we're in with these guys having to plead, saying, hey, we're critical infrastructure. And, we've said for a long time, it doesn't matter how small you are. You're not too small to be avoided, because maybe the big guys won't pick you up, but somebody's going to try to pick you up and attack you, because there is value in every single company, and there's value in all of our data that's out there.
Yeah. So the interesting thing here for me is that number one, it's been a relatively quiet summer since July 4th when it comes to ransomware attacks. But a couple of weeks ago, when Andre and I did the show, we went over some information that showed that there's an uptick in certain kinds of activity on the dark web. And I kind of predicted that ransomware attacks were going to increase. And we're talking about this massive ransomware attack. But the reality of it is there's a lot of ransomware attacks going on right now that you aren't hearing about. And I think that this is just the beginning of the uptick. We have Revel back. We have DarkSide back as this BlackMatter group or whatever they're called. And the other interesting thing that I want to bring up and make people aware about is cybercriminals have changed their tactics, and they are now evaluating how companies respond after they get hit with ransomware. And they know a bunch of things. They know that you're hiring professional negotiators, or your insurance company is. And you're bringing outside help. And what that is doing is reducing the amount of money the business has to pay. And that's the objective of bringing these people in. So the cyber criminals know this. So now what they're doing is they're now threatening you, and they're telling you that if you go to these professionals or you file an insurance claim, you're not getting your data back. And that's where they're at with this stuff now. Yeah. And the interesting thing is like the negotiator for this collective or this co-op, whatever they call it, they were initially saying, oh, like, we're not that big of a fish. You got the wrong people, right? But the reality of it is there's a statement from them that says there's going to be a very public disruption in the grain, pork, and chicken supply. About 40% of grain production runs on our software, and 11 million animals' feed schedules rely on us. So 40% of the grain production in the United States runs on this company's software. That's why the demand is $5 million. Is $5 million, and the fact that they went in this direction initially, you guys feel like that was a misstep, or do you think that that was a very smart strategic move, knowing that this isn't one of the ransomware groups that basically says, we're gonna, if you go to professionals, we're not giving you any of your data back. What do you guys think about, like,
well,
was that a misstep in the beginning of this negotiation, or do you think that was a smart move?
I mean, I think they know what they're doing, because Colonial was 4.4 million, and now here they are asking for more.
No, what I'm saying is do you think the co-op
Mm-hmm.
coming out and saying, like, we're not a big fish, do you think that was a smart move on their part?
I mean, I think it's just I think it's just like them trying to make them feel sorry for themselves in a way. Kind of like, hey, why are you?
Right, and it didn't work. So, I mean, I know what my opinion is, and it's like, I think it was a dumb move. I think it was stupid for them to come in and try to play that card when you got to know that these guys are in your system. And this is my point. They're in your system. They're studying your company. They know who you are before they release this ransomware.
Yeah. So if you look on that that screenshot of that conversation you're reading from, they are trying to say that, hey, we're critical infrastructure, and the criminals reply back, and notice how it says support. Mm-hmm. So if y'all don't know this, y'all two do, but our listeners, they actually have quote unquote support teams and negotiation teams, the ransomware organizations do, for you to talk to. And their support person comes back and says, you do not follow under the rules. Everyone will only incur losses. They're saying you're not gonna affect the food chain, that everyone's gonna only incur losses. It's not going to bring down the economy. It says the critical ones mean the vital needs of a person, and you earn money. Since everything's so serious with you, let's come to an agreement quickly and solve everything quickly. Yikes. So they're coming back and they're saying, hey, you're not really vital. It's not going to shut down the whole economy. And, let's just get to an agreement quickly and move on. They're trying to get their money. This is a mess. This is a real mess.
This is a real mess, because it goes to show me it's a telltale sign that they did not have a disaster recovery plan in place or an incident response plan in place. Because when you're saying things to, like, CISA is going to be demanding answers from us within the next 12 hours or so, and we're going to have to tell them exactly what has happened. Well, what has happened is your security sucks and you got hit with ransomware. It's pretty damn obvious. You don't have to tell them anything. And this is in the news. So CISA knows. And I'm sure they're already involved and the FBI's involved.
Yeah.
But
kind of saying, hey, I'm going to go tell that, the big brother or daddy's going to find out. Yeah. You better, like, give us our data back.
Right.
Do you wonder if this is the FBI that's actually in this chat with the cybercriminal support and they're playing dumb?
No, I don't think so.
To hit back at them?
Yeah, and something like that wouldn't get released by the FBI.
Okay.
I don't. That was some dummy who put things out on social media they probably shouldn't have.
Also,
what's that?
No, I said, going back to the cyber incident response plan, it's interesting to see how the technology, because you think farmers, and obviously, back then farmers didn't have technology. So it's curious to see how reliant they are, that because of this technology not working, they're saying that they're going to have to shut down. And with that said, did nobody think about, hey, if our servers or our systems doesn't work, is there a manual way to feed the chickens and all of this stuff? Like, so it's curious to see if they don't really have a plan. Do they just all the animals are just going to be out there and dying because they don't?
The food all comes through the cooperative, and then the cooperative is using their software to distribute it to people that need it, to feed cows, people that need it to make bread, this and that. Right. That's where the bottleneck is happening. Like, if the farmer had an actual truck of grain, I mean, they don't need the cooperative to feed the chickens, but it's this whole process of bringing in the grain from all the grain owners and then distributing it back out to where it needs to go. That's where the bottleneck is.
Right, and the software that this company uses is what does that. So that's now down. So something that was automated and efficient is now no longer automated and efficient. And this is what I talk about with businesses all the time, guys. It's like people are like, Bryan, you talk about a competitive advantage for technology in your business, right? And you can see these little cracks in businesses' plans and their maturity. And a company that understands the risks and is prepared and has an incident response plan and has tested it is further along, and that is a competitive advantage for their company over a competitor who doesn't have that. And I would say that there's a less percentage that are prepared than that aren't prepared. And you can see that here with this cooperative. They are completely on their heels at this point, trying to basically beg these guys to get them out of this situation. And this is a good lesson learned for businesses, in my opinion. Number one, that unless there's some kind of crazy like international geopolitical breakthrough, you're not going to have anybody who is going to save your business from these types of situations. It's on you as the business and the business owner and the business leaders, CEOs need to step up and recognize this threat and do everything humanly possible to make sure A, you're protecting yourself, and then B, you have the right things in place if you do get hit. The other thing is that I want to mention is that now the writing's on the wall, right? There are the 16 critical infrastructure, but like we said, I think when we talked about this back when on this show back in June, if we go back, I believe we said this, where it was like, it seems like there's kind of like a haves and have-nots in this group of 16 critical infrastructure sectors, right? Like, is that hospital big enough, for them to do something? And that seems to be the case. Like, if you're not big enough, if you're not going to create that much of a disruption in the supply chain, you're really not in the group of 16. Like, there has to be a certain threshold. And that's basically the signal that these criminals are giving all businesses right now with this attack. They're basically saying that we're not going to attack somebody who's, if we disrupt their business and it doesn't seem to create that much of a ripple, we're going to attack them. And it doesn't matter what sector you're in. So all small businesses out there who think that they're too small to be attacked, let this be your warning that you are a prime target for these guys.
They're going to go where the money is, and there's money everywhere.
Right.
And the thing like that's disturbing about our evil is, and organizations like that, they're a well-oiled machine that can deploy ransomware as a service where your average bloke can just go get it and use that and have like all of these tools of a giant company behind them. Even with all this stuff today, even if none of this happened, like as that software, ransomware as a service explodes, we're going to see more and more. They're going to go after everything. We heard recently of a private individual who got ransomware on their Facebook page. Basically, they hijacked the Facebook page, wanted $2,000 to give it back to them. I mean, it's going to hit everything. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. You might try to log into T-Mobile or something, and boom, your account's been stolen, and they want money for it. So yeah, it's going to get worse. You're right. If you thought you were going to miss it, you're not going to be able to anymore. It's coming.
No, because they basically are saying, okay, we won't attack the top 1%, but we're attacking the 99%.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they're telling you. So, Andre, anything you want to add? I think we've covered this pretty well at this point. Any last thoughts you want to share with our audience before we move on?
I don't know if you guys ever watched the political cartoons like on Wall Street Journal or something, but I could see this being so funny where there's a cartoon where one side says, "Oh, I'm too small. They'll never hack me," and then the other side says, "I can't believe they got me."
You're right. You're right. So here I go. We're gonna move on real quick, guys, and change gears. I think that was a good discussion, and we brought a lot of good things to the surface that people need to be aware about. But we have a question here from an audience member. Julie wants to know, how does a regular individual protect themselves? So why don't we talk about that before, or actually it's kind of related to this, right? So how does an individual protect themselves from, this type of stuff that we're talking about? Let's say they're not a business owner. Maybe they're an employee, which is what we've talked about, on this show before, is how employees can play a part in protecting their business from, suffering a cyber attack. But how does a regular individual protect themselves from these criminals and what's going on out there?
I would say, first off, I think this brings up a larger discussion that's got to happen, because like we were saying in our last segment, if you will, the ransomware as a service is going to push this out into the smaller and smaller and smaller clients. It's going to start hitting private individuals more. And there's not really somebody who's marketing that I know of that's really marketing to your private individual. But I would definitely say keep your devices updated is huge important. Stay away from like don't buy like an off-brand one-off Android phone. Don't use old iPhones that aren't being updated anymore. Get you a device like a Samsung that has Knox, or a OnePlus that's keeping on a regular update schedule. It's very important. I would say, obviously you have to have a good antivirus with more than just, I would never use a free antivirus. Get an antivirus that has more than just, hey, scanning for files. And then, use a service for your personal email, like a Gmail or something similar that has built-in protections against spam, phishing. Man, it's really a weak spot, I think, in our whole economy right now.
So you just throw a million things at people who don't understand what the hell you're talking about. Give me one or two things that you would recommend that somebody would do. Like,
well,
just
keep your devices updated.
Yep.
Get a really good antivirus.
All right, Andre, one or two things.
Two-form factor authentication on every single thing you use that you log in on the internet.
Yep. The one thing I would tell you is just trust, but verify everything, right? So don't be afraid to use tools, right? But make sure that you know who is providing you that tool, how seriously do they take protecting your data and and security. But on top of that, you want to just make sure that you're verifying anything that comes across your phone, whether it be a text message or your computer. Text message, email. Before you click on that, just ask yourself some simple questions. Does the email address match up to the person? Would I expect this person to send me this, or was I expecting this? And if you weren't expecting a message from somebody with a link or an attachment, call that person and see if they really sent it to you. Because the reality of it is that the average person is not going to be, their front door isn't going to be busted down and somebody's going to like break into their home network through their firewall or through their modem or whatever they have set up.
Yeah,
they're going to get in by you letting them in by clicking on a link or receiving a message on your phone. So any device that you use that you connect with the internet, just make sure that you're extra careful on those types of things, because that's where we're seeing most of these attacks come from is through these types of messages and things like that. But the other thing you need to worry about is what I have on the screen, and that's this ExpressVPN. CIO was named in the UAE surveillance scandal. Now, I'm just going to quickly educate people on what this was. So there were several former NSA employees that I guess were hired by the UAE, or they started their own company and that company was hired by the UAE. But they were basically tasked with deploying malware and spying on mercenaries in the UAE. Where it became tricky for these guys is the UAE then asked them to start spying on Americans, and that's where it became an issue for them. But it was exposed in this reporting, which was really good reporting, by the way, that these former NSA people who were trained by the NSA are now out there as private citizens offering their services to other countries. And at the same time that they were doing this, the CIO of ExpressVPN was one of the people involved in this quote unquote scandal. And the reason we wanted to bring it up is because I get asked questions like this all the time. Like, should I be using a VPN on my phone, on my computer, from one of these providers like ExpressVPN, NordVPN? I don't know if you guys know of any other ones that you might want to rattle off that are popular. But there's a lot of these VPN services out here that, quite frankly, they promote cybersecurity, that if you use their product, you're going to be more secure. Now, the concern here with ExpressVPN is, the ethics of this individual who was the CIO is now in question because of his activities and what he was being paid to do by the UAE. And at the same time, you have a company where basically you're offering a piece of software that is in the name of protecting their online activity and what they're doing and who they are. They're able to see everything that you're doing, they're able to intercept a lot of stuff with these types of services that go through them. So it goes back to my whole point with trust, but verify. We're not saying don't use these products, but you better know who's behind these products before you decide to go plunk your money down and install them on your systems, right? You need to do your due diligence to find out, like, is this a company that I can trust? Where are they based out of? Like, personally, I'm not going to hire or sign on to a VPN service that's run out of China or Russia or, any other country, probably besides the US for me. I mean, quite frankly, I wouldn't use one of these services because I know how to set up these types of services and run my own, which is very secure. But if you don't know how to do that and you want to rely on these services, there are some that are very good and they're above board. And as we found out with ExpressVPN, which is a very popular VPN software, by the way, not so much. So I just want to hear your guys' thoughts on that. And I guess we'll start with Andre and then we'll roll over to Randy. What's your insight on this kind of stuff?
Yeah, so ExpressVPN, I always get that question, especially from our business customers when they're just looking for something personal and they hear the word VPN, they hear that this is the safest thing to do. Right. And ExpressVPN is one of the ones because it's like maybe $150 a year. They give you X amount of accounts. So it was very disturbing to hear about what the CIO did, because essentially he was doing things as it relates to the UAE and creating things like zero-click surveillance and things about their human rights because of what happens in that country. At the same time, if you are a company and your job is to protect or create this VPN and have this tunnel, you want the brightest. And sometimes you have to hire people that may have done things in the past that they were contracted to do whatever. But it's kind of like hiring the ex-felon who broke into banks and did all this stuff, and now he's the consultant to tell other companies not what to do and what they look for. So that's the way I look at it.
Randy.
Yeah, I take a little more grim look here because so a couple things. One, ExpressVPN has a huge PR nightmare on their hands because it's not that they knew that this guy did this and he changed his ways and they hired him to help him protect people. This guy was involved in protecting people when he's literally turning over political activists and people that are, protesting and things like that to a government. So that's a PR nightmare. And we're going to have to really watch closely and see how are they going to handle this. Are they going to try to sweep it under the rug? Is the guy out of a job, which I assume he is, but what are they going to do to reassure people? Because they're at their core, the VPN is about privacy. And the thing is that all of your data going through their VPNs, going through their certificates, it puts a lot of your data, if not all or most of it, at risk of being looked at. And if a CIO of a company is helping another government get private data, what makes us think that he's not doing it at ExpressVPN also?
I think they are. I think it was just a way for them to kind of take what they were doing a step further and offer a free, cheap VPN and then see who we can get on it or promote it to. You could run targeted ads to people, and you're always seeing this ExpressVPN and some of these guys, they go overboard with their marketing and they say like they're the silver bullet for cybersecurity, which is not true at all. They're misleading people in their advertising. It's annoying. Mm-hmm. It's frustrating when you know this stuff. But you make great points there, Randy. It's like, here we are, but that's why I say, trust but verify. Like there are certain vendors out there who, they offer security products and endpoint protection, but they also offer VPNs. I mean, if I was going to use a service like that, I would tend to lean towards those. Like for one, I'll give a shout out to Bitdefender since, they released the REvil key this week for the ransomware. So if you were ever attacked by REvil, head over to Bitdefender. You can get the key to unlock your files if you still have encrypted files from REvil. But they offer a VPN, Bitdefender, that I believe is very good. And if somebody were to say, hey, I need to use a VPN, a public VPN service like that, I would probably recommend them. But again, you need to know who you're working with, and you can't just pick a VPN provider because you like the price, because it might be low priced for a reason, because they're stealing all your data, right? Or they're stealing all your private information and reselling it, or who knows, or spying on you. You never know. So, Andre, what are your thoughts on this whole situation with ExpressVPN?
Well, it's very similar to can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. It's very similar to, if you remember, with TikTok. Remember? And I would say something like this: if TikTok was all US based, it would kind of be that same scenario where they're like, hey, they're giving information or allegedly giving information to China.
Well, you know what? You bring up a good point there, because now you said that, I recall, and that's what people need to be aware of, and I want them to take away as we wrap up the podcast here. Just remember that, you have to really look at these companies, because we've seen it with I know it wasn't Signal, but I know a encrypted messaging service that, there was a big security issue with one of them. And, a lot of people that don't know, they look at these apps and they look at these services and they promote that they're secure and that they protect you and the communication that you're sending and the things that you're doing online. But you got to watch. You got to really look at what they're doing, how they're doing it. And it's kind of like the Wild West right now. There's nobody out there who's going to kind of verify these companies and say that they're doing what they're promoting in their marketing. And then, when you sign up for these services, you're agreeing to very lengthy terms of service agreements that most people probably don't read. And I would caution you and tell you that you need to read those things, or at least go deep into their website and look at their policies and things like that. Look at maybe any certifications that they received for their security or their facilities. That should all be out there just as much as their marketing, that, they protect you from, all these bad things happening out there. So it's a tough go. I'm not going to say it's easy, but I want to bring awareness to this stuff because, this is probably one of the number one questions I get from people about, these public VPN types of things. And, I just wanted to shed some light and an awareness around these products and what you need to be aware of before you decide to buy one. So anything else you guys want to add today?
No, I'm good.
Randy, you're on mute, dude. You're on mute. You're talking.
Sorry about that, man. I had a little bit of
you still haven't found the mute.
But I was going to say, yikes. I mean, this opens up a whole nother can of worms because literally all of these apps that we use, we're putting trust in.
Yep.
And, we were talking in the green room about Telegram. Saw an article this week that a lot of the bad actors are using Telegram more than the dark web for their communication. And, who owns Telegram? And just what you were saying and me thinking about that, it's like, how many of these apps do we use that we put so much trust in that we don't really know anything about their ownership, or we do, maybe we don't know about their security practices. Right. I mean, it's very, very disturbing if you think too hard about it.
Yeah, correct. Right.
I just Googled it. I don't know if you knew the answer, but it's a Russian. He's Russian. He lives in Russia.
Telegram?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So interesting.
Yeah. So be careful what you do, how you communicate, what you put on your phone. Like just the app being on your phone could be a risk, right? Mm-hmm. You don't even have to type a message in it. Depending on what permissions that app requires to be on your phone, it could be reading all your messages and because you gave it permission to,
or all your files.
Right. And then people don't understand all that. So it's good that we bring the awareness to it. So, all right, gentlemen, I'm about to wrap it up. My voice is like on the edge here. I think I'm losing it. So thank you for the insight. Thank you for hopping on the show with me today. Anything else you want to add before we hit the end button? All right. We'll see y'all next week, probably with a bunch more cyber attacks, and we'll update you on this grain situation. Hopefully we don't have a disruption in the supply chain. My guess is that they'll probably just pay the ransom, and then our FBI will try to hack back after they pay it. And that's probably what we've seen with like the last 3 or 4 big ones. So we'll see where this ends up. We'll keep you updated. And thanks everyone for participating and viewing. And remember, share the show once it hits your favorite podcast platform.